Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. Coming up on today's show, it's a sad day for English football as Chelsea and the Metropolitan Police launched an investigation into claims that Raheem Sterling was racially abused at Stamford Bridge yesterday. The title race, it's on. City, they're the first to blink. They lost 2-0 at Chelsea, while rampant Liverpool, they scored 4 at Bournemouth. And Jose Mourinho's agent, he issues a statement telling the world what a good job his client is doing as manager of Manchester United. They are 16 points behind Liverpool this morning. Point scoring for us this morning, Jason Burt is the chief football correspondent at the Daily Telegraph. Andy Dunn is the chief sports writer with The Mirror. Jonathan Northcroft is the football correspondent with the Sunday Times. Morning, guys. Thanks for joining us this morning. Don't forget, you can tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on your screen over the next 90 minutes. Let's have a look at the papers then. The tabloids dominated by that incident yesterday at Stamford Bridge. It's disgusting. Ian Wright's fury. He was tweeting yesterday that racism storm rocks Chelsea. An investigation launched by Chelsea and the Met Police last night. Chelsea race storm on the back of The Mirror this morning. It's also on the back of The Sun. Sick is the headline. But also the football City slayer, David Luiz, scoring the second goal for Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. You blew it. That's the back of the Mail on Sunday this morning. Pep's knocked off the top spot as Chelsea beat them. Liverpool on top. They're ahead of City by 1 point this morning. Sunday Telegraph, title race. It's on. And then goals pull out in the Sun this morning. Not sure about this, but I'm a celebrity. Mo Salah on top form yesterday down at Bournemouth. Liverpool are on top form, and that's why they're top. Manchester United finally finding some form. This is the Express's sports pull-out. Ash and Rash cash in. Good win for Manchester United and Jose Mourinho under pressure as the Manchester United manager. But we're going to start with events yesterday, Jason, at Stamford Bridge. Yeah. We'll get on to the game and all things around the title race in part 2 of the programme. But first we must deal with the incident that involved Chelsea supporters and Raheem Sterling last night. And, of course, as things stand, they are only allegations. Yes. And, of course, the footage has been doing the rounds on social media and on television over the last 12 hours or so. But what are your thoughts on what happened in that incident yesterday?
Well, you could see in the press box there was clearly something had happened. There was an incident, stewards got called in and they obviously were there towards the end of the game. So clearly there was something going on. Again, after that you saw on social media the images and the footage that came up, and you're watching it several times, and clearly they are abusing him. What we have to establish is whether or not there's racial abuse involved. If there's racial abuse, it's a crime. It's a hate crime. The guys or the people involved should be prosecuted. That needs to be established. But also beyond that, though, and what will be strange about it is it'll almost be like if it isn't racial abuse, it'll almost be like a relief that that's not a racial incident. But actually, it's just disgusting anyway. It is vile, disgusting abuse aimed at someone who all he's doing is playing football. And there seems to be this kind of bizarre acceptance that if he's not being racially abused or abused about his sexual orientation or whatever, then it's almost acceptable to abuse him. Yes, it's a crime if he's racially abused, but it's borderline a crime for abusing him in the first place. I mean, why should he be abused? And I find it unbelievable that there seems to be this kind of acceptance that football supporters can level that sort of language and that sort of action towards somebody. He was inches away from these guys. He was inches away. All he's doing is playing football. And what is going on in society, again, that you feel emboldened and have the right to do that to somebody just because you bought a ticket to go to a football game. This idea that it's passion or banter or a release is just wrong. You can chant support of your team, you can say things about the other side if you want to, but this level of abuse where they're leaning into the guy, almost like 4 guys coordinated, leaning into him, so angry. You're thinking, what's going on in your lives? So these guys will have gone home last night and their families would have said to them, how was the football? Oh, it was great, we won 2-0. And, you know, people are going to watch that this morning. If it's a member of my family, I'd be totally ashamed of them, totally and utterly ashamed. If they've racially abused them, prosecute. Ban them for lives, prosecute. The police are involved, they're investigating. Yes, but beyond that, the abuse anyway is just unacceptable, and it has to be criticised for that as well, I think. You know, I find it unbelievable that people can think they've got a right to do that.
And if we take it frame by frame, do you think Raheem Sterling reacted after when he was being whatever was said to him? Did you notice a particular reaction from Raheem Sterling?
No, I didn't. I thought he reacted with remarkable restraint. It would be ultra remarkable restraint if he was being racially abused. It remains remarkable restraint if he was just being abused in the manner that Jason's referring to, considering how close they were in his vicinity, you know, and clearly screaming vitriol of whatever nature at him. I thought he reacted, as he always does. You know, he always reacts quite phlegmatically about these things, and got on with the game, and it didn't affect his game. Just going back to that, I understand that close quarters abuse of a player is something that is just horrible to see. I agree. I do think it's a rather utopian idea, Jason, that people aren't going to go and aim abuse at opposition players. And I don't think that's a new society thing. I think that's been going on for a long time. They are, you know, that is the way. And I think if we're saying people should go to football matches and should just cheer their own and say jolly hard luck to the other side, that isn't going to happen, is it? You know, this is not the way football fans of a lot of sport behave. However, on that particular occasion, you know, and on other occasions, including at Arsenal at the North London derby, these incidents that are, you know, so close to the players when they are on the touchline, you know, these are the ones that really have to be. And in a way, in the modern age, you know, let's face it, we didn't see exactly what happened at the time. We were alerted to it by social media, like everybody else, and then followed up on that. These are instances that can be picked out, which is the good thing. You know, you can actually isolate these individuals who are behaving like this and pursue them. And if it's found out that they have done something that is able to be prosecuted, then prosecute them.
I'm fascinated that it's Raheem Sterling. Being Raheem must be pretty tough for him at times. Henry Winter was on the programme last week, and Henry had been to Sterling's house in Cheshire and saw what he believed to be the real Raheem Sterling. But how difficult it must be to be Raheem Sterling. The chants in the first half, I don't know if you're aware of them. Certainly one that we can't use the words, but secondly, the other one was Raheem Sterling, you run like a girl, which was pretty loud. If you were in the stadium yesterday, you couldn't have failed to have heard what was being said. How difficult must it be for Raheem to be Raheem Sterling?
I've got enormous admiration for him, because I think he's probably got the most difficult job of any Premier League footballer at the moment. Yesterday was his birthday. You know, he turns 24. He's having the best season of his life. He's done really well for England, for his country. That was a great interview Henry did. But the thing you notice is that every time Raheem does an interview like that, and he explains his life story, which is quite an inspiring life story in many ways, the way he's risen from poverty, the way his family struggled, the way he's bought his mum a house, all that sort of stuff. Every time he explains himself, and you read it and you hope, well, people might understand him a bit better. They don't. You know, Andy and I think talked about it in the World Cup. He was continually bottom of the poll that I think the BBC ran after every game, that supporters voted for man of the match. No matter how he played, he seems to be the target for people. He seems to represent something that a certain, you know, section of society doesn't like, which is pretty horrific. And I agree with Jason that even if it wasn't racial abuse, then it was still, there was an edge to it, there was a violence to that abuse in the faces of the guys sort of leaning over the stand at him. And it's something about Raheem that seems to spark that. I think there's pretty dark reasons for the reason it is Raheem, and I just think that he has lived with that throughout his whole career, and again yesterday found a way to just keep playing his game. I've got infinite admiration for him.
What do you think the reasons are?
Well, I think if you look at, I think he represents a certain type of young black footballer, young black person that maybe middle-aged white men of a certain type or wider society of a certain hue can't deal with. He's confident, he's successful. You get fans who hate when black players score goals and dance, which I've never understood that. But there's something in seeing a successful, young, confident black person that seems to trigger a certain reaction in a type of person. I can't understand that mindset. I don't want to be inside that mindset, but we see it happen in society, not just in football.
It's by complete coincidence that I've got these two papers as they are placed in front of me, but one of them is of Raheem Sterling yesterday. The other one is of Marcus Rashford. Okay, a younger player, but I think the media perception and the public's perception of the two players is very different. Yeah. Why would that be? They're both young, they're both black, they're both successful. They're both playing for high-profile football clubs. Why would the perception of these two footballers be any different?
I think that's a really good point. I mean, the point I was going to make was exactly the one that Jonathan just made. You know, there seems to be something around Raheem Sterling, the way that some people could believe he conducts himself, which is I totally disagree with them, and I think it is because he's a young black guy. But as you say, Marcus Rashford, I don't know. I really don't know the answer to that. Maybe it's because he's a youth product from Manchester United who stayed there, I guess. I don't know. Is it that? I can't fathom out the reason why.
Well, I think there's an element of that. You know, a small element of the Raheem Sterling situation is the fact that, you know, he agitated for the move from Liverpool and then was portrayed in some areas, you know, as basically doing it for the money. Yeah. And people didn't particularly like that, rightly or wrongly. I mean, I think we are also skirting around the obvious thing is how he's portrayed in our business, in the media. You know, we're not touching it. That has to be a factor, whether we like it or not. You know, how we as an industry have portrayed Raheem Sterling, how he has appeared in the front pages of our publications. Has he got undue prominence for things he's done? Has he really done anything wrong? And that then, once someone picks up on that, don't forget there's always a copycat, a herd mentality that then pick up on, basically, you know, you'll get people inside football grounds who won't actually know why they're doing something. Yeah. They're doing it because the guy next to them's doing it, or they'll do it because the crowd the previous week had done it. So I don't think we can get away from the responsibilities that the media in general, newspapers in particular, have had in the portrayal of Raheem Sterling. We can't hide from that. I think enough has been done, or is trying to be done, to, if there has been any responsibility on our part, is to try and remedy that. And you know, and I think Raheem has been brilliant. You mentioned that interview with Henry, you know, and he's done a couple of group interviews at the World Cup where, you know, he's come across very well. He's happy to, you know, address the issues, and I think we've done what we can to at the moment, and we'll continue to support Raheem Sterling because I think he deserves the support.
I think we've also seen the power of the media in the last, certainly today, when the reaction of newspapers to what happened yesterday. But I'm also thinking last Sunday, the Arsenal-Tottenham game, when the banana was thrown onto the pitch after Aubameyang scored. That particular incident, how did you feel? Well, how did you feel about that?
Well, you get to the point you think, what can be done about this? I think Rio Ferdinand was talking about the Colin Kaepernick protests and even suggesting black players should take the knee or some similar protest if there's racial abuse. And that's, you know, I would not quibble with any choice that the black footballers made to try and combat this kind of thing. I think in terms of the media, the best thing we can do is shame people. I think the best route to solving this is actually shaming the perpetrators and not giving them a hiding place of you know, ambiguity or this didn't represent me. So the guy that threw the banana skin will not be at any football matches for the rest of his life, and hopefully has been sort of shunned by people who know him. As Jason said, this guy has embarrassed his family, and he's now all over the front pages. He's over TV. I think that is the best thing that can possibly be done, and there has been, as you say, Ash, at least a strong media reaction to this that might maybe society hasn't changed enough, but maybe our industry is starting to change and deal with this sort of stuff without ambiguity and a bit more head on. I mean, the thing that just struck me yesterday, apart from anything else, is we're in London, you know, the most multicultural city in the world, and it's 2 racist incidents at football in 2 weeks. So it's going to take a change in just how people who do this sort of thing think about it, and individually shaming them is probably or seeing examples of people being shamed.
Yeah, it's going to be a big change, you know, over a long period of time. And bear in mind, as a nation, England has one of the most diverse football teams it's ever had. You know, I mean, just look at the makeup of the World Cup squad. Look at the makeup going forward of our under-17 team, our under-19 team, our under-21 team. This is ethnically a brilliantly diverse mix. Yet then, if you go and watch England abroad, and you look at the following, I'm not you know, denigrating that following at all. They're very loyal and they go abroad. But if you actually look at the ethnic diversity of that England following, you know, it's just It's not really, basically, particularly diverse. So it's a process that just isn't going to be overnight by shaming an individual, whoever it may be. You know, it's something that the clubs and the organisations, great organisations like Kick It Out, the media, the government, all have to be basically not drop the ball, not think that it's gone away, because it hasn't.
No, it hasn't.
I mean, if there's any hope or whatever, it's that when you look at the fans, it's there's a generation gap. There's a whole lot of younger fans around who are looking at these old guys going, you know, what's going on here?
Yep.
And it's a particular age group and a particular type that are doing it. So I hope maybe...
We should also say that praise Chelsea for the speed. They launched their inquiry and investigation yesterday into that incident. OK, next up, we're going to talk about the title race. Big win for Chelsea yesterday. Big win for Liverpool as well. They're top of the Premier League. More than next. Welcome back. Big day in the Premier League yesterday. We were all at Stamford Bridge to see Chelsea beat Manchester City 2-0, which we'll come on to in a moment. Liverpool, of course, winning 4-0 at Bournemouth. They're top of the Premier League by a point. Andy, your piece this morning in the Mirror. Manchester City, rattled, ragged, bemused, beaten. Words that you very, very seldom associate with Manchester City these days under Pep Guardiola.
I know, so when you get the chance to use them, you know, you're straight in there. That was actually in the immediate... I have to say, they didn't play that badly, but in the immediate aftermath of the David Luiz header, that's when Ederson just booted the ball up front, turned his back in disgust. Pep Guardiola was in, the fourth official, Andre Marin's ear, moaning about some bogus injustice to the goal. And you just thought, I've not seen City like this for a long time. No. Not in the Premier League anyway. And it just felt like a significant moment. And it was a significant moment. Listen, it's a significant defeat. First thing I would say is that I remember when they were beaten at Anfield for the first time last season, for the first time during the season.
Yeah, you wouldn't... January 14, wasn't it?
January 14, you wondered how they would respond, and they responded by, I think it was winning 7 and drawing one of the next 8 games until they were then beaten by United. That took them to within that game of winning the title. So you shouldn't have any worries about how they're going to respond. However, it was just a reminder that they are, I wouldn't say fallible, but in individual games you can get at them. And bear in mind they had Aguero missing, De Bruyne missing, Benjamin Mendy missing, key players. You know, you could say it was a third choice left back really, because Zinchenko, who's also missing, he probably would have played. So they've got that intense style will take its toll physically. So they can be vulnerable, and they were vulnerable yesterday. When they hadn't scored in that first half hour of dominance, they were vulnerable, and Chelsea exposed that vulnerability, particularly in the first 20 minutes of the second half. So what that should say is that in the games that will decide the title, and the games that will decide the title are the games against other teams in the so-called Big Six. City only have to go now, I think, to United, and the rest of them are at home. They are the games that are going to decide the title. And I think Chelsea showed yesterday that any one of those teams can beat Manchester City, which will mean that the title will be in the balance for an awful lot longer than a lot of people thought. Finally, it's also just a quick reminder that, you know, Liverpool have had the best start. They've won the title 18 times, Liverpool Football Club, and they've never had a start in 16 games like this one. So that tells you this is for real. This is for real. They're top of the table, and we're not far off the halfway point. I think it's going to be a fascinating battle between those two, and I think the other teams will be heavily involved. And I just think we're in for a second half of the season. It's just going to be, I think, one of the best we've seen in recent memory.
It was a big win for Liverpool yesterday. Should they be getting more? Should they be feeling more love, or is it too early?
I think there's possibly an element they're being underrated because the football hasn't been the sort of, you know, exuberant champagne stuff of last season at times. But I think they'd be quite happy.
But yesterday wasn't it?
Yesterday was old love. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I think they'd be quite happy that there's not quite the same bandwagon. Liverpool's problem over the years has always been dealing with that pressure, dealing with that bandwagon, and it's all on City. I think the really encouraging thing for Liverpool yesterday, apart from Mo Salah's return to his best form, they had Fabinho and they had Keita playing, and for them to, I think, win the title, they needed to get that bit more in midfield, and those two are starting to play and starting to make a contribution. Another clean sheet without Gomez. The signs that they've actually got the squad that's strong enough to win the title. But it will come down to being able to put pressure on City in the way that they did yesterday, when they've got a chance to play first or whatever, or if it's a head-to-head. And there's another game coming up in a couple of weeks where I think they play on a Friday night and City don't play till the weekend. So City are such a good team, but as Andy said, they are capable of rocking under a bit of pressure, and it's Liverpool's job to put as much of that on at the right moments as they can and win that game on January the 3rd.
Go on.
I was just saying, because City have been that good, you know, it's just so easy to overlook the qualities of the other teams up there. And I don't just mean Liverpool.
Yeah.
I mean Tottenham, superb last night, excellent last night, thoroughly efficient, got the job done, left Harry Kane on the bench. You know, a really good team. Chelsea, as we saw yesterday, a really good team. Arsenal, you know, was it 21 now? 21 games unbeaten. A really good team. You know, these aren't clubs that are just playing a supporting role. They're going to play a key role in all this.
What I thought yesterday was quite interesting was, I mean, people talk about who's the most important player at, you know, Manchester City, and people talk about De Bruyne and Fernandinho. Yeah. It's Aguero, isn't it? I mean, Aguero would have taken one of those chances in that first half hour. That would have changed an awful lot in that game because, you know, let's be honest, for 44 minutes, it was so one-sided. It was almost like different level, like a FA Cup tie of one team hanging on in there, and then it just changed. And I was surprised, actually. I agree with Andy. I was surprised that in that second half, the second half starts, and you're thinking, right, City will come back into this. The game starts, you're thinking, I'm not sure they're going to do this. Actually, I'm not sure they've got. It's a bit bizarre saying not enough up front, but you know they didn't seem to have something there. You thought actually they're going to do this. It didn't seem that slight element of conviction about them. They seemed to lose a little bit of their belief, without Aguero up there. That's what I thought. They didn't quite have it, and I think there was a mistake not to start with Gabriel Jesus. I didn't think it worked without a centre forward. But at the same time, when he did come on, he didn't look like he really had it. You know, had that kind of belief. I think it will change a lot when Aguero comes back, but I didn't quite. Yesterday, to me, proved more than I thought that Aguero is just so important to them. He's just so vital.
I did enjoy the press conferences last night, though, because inevitably we asked Guardiola if it was a mistake not to start with Jesus up front. However, with Maurizio Sarri, it was... Well, this is a masterstroke. not playing a striker.
Yeah.
Of course.
Like the false nine derby, whoever wins that, you know, it's way for him, and it hasn't way for someone else.
It looked like he just was not enjoying it at all. He was waving his arms out. Like,
what more can they do?
Second half, he did get more into doing that, but obviously that's because they were ahead, and so the dynamic of the game had changed. They could play that counter-attacking football more effectively because City were pushing on.
Is the tactic of the false nine, is that managers trying to be too clever?
Yeah, it's also, yes, well, obviously in Sarri's case it was clever, in Pep's case it wasn't. I mean, I think it's slightly different in those two cases because, to me, I don't see... different reasons. The reason why, I guess, Sarri will have played it is because he knew he was going to be on the defensive. He knew they weren't going to have, as is probably their custom, the lion's share of possession. So that was a more defensive ploy. All that struck me about Pep's selection was that he doesn't, on his current form, trust Gabriel Jesus. Because to me, the balance between Sané, Sterling and Mahrez basically drifting across that front line didn't work. And to me, it looked far more balanced if you've got a central striker, preferably an Aguero, if not Jesus, with Sané and Sterling working off him either side, and with the ball, with the outlet that central striker provides for David Silva, who must have had one of his quietest games for a long time yesterday. You know, but he's picking up possession quite advanced and looking up, and there's nothing through the middle. You know, those balls that he loves to thread through, there was nothing there for him. So I think in Pep's case, it backfired. And strange enough, I agree with Jason, City have scored 45 goals. I mean, 45 goals in 15 games heading into yesterday, now 45 in 16. And yet you still look at them and you think, I wonder if they could use another striker. You do, because you've got one striker who is currently suffering recurrent problems with physically, which is only to be expected considering the gruelling sort of career he's had and he's, you know, at that age, and another striker who Pep maybe doesn't trust. So you think, you know, does he need someone else?
How hard is it to retain the motivation? Manchester City won the title last season. To go again, to reset, to reboot and say, OK, we'll be champions again this season. How difficult is that?
Well, historically, we know how difficult it is. Very few teams retain the title. And when I thought one of the revealing things about that All or Nothing documentary was you realise there's so much more to Guardiola than just the tactics and the science and the sort of boffin nature. He's actually a motivator as much as anything else. And you can see him in his press conferences continually trying to find ways to address the possible problem, and we've never actually seen it in their play, but the possible problem of complacency. And I was at Bournemouth last week when City played badly for 20 minutes, and he was delighted because he said he had 20 minutes to talk to them about. Yesterday, he seemed, in a way, he was very upbeat in his press conference, wasn't he? He seemed quite pleased that this had shown the world that City weren't going to stroll to the title, and he could then use that with his players. So he's continually fighting against that. But you know, yesterday wasn't a story of City being complacent in any way, or you know, the work rate was the usual incredible stuff. It was maybe just the younger players up front, perhaps Sané, I think, maybe not quite dealing with a more difficult game, and there's still areas to improve. But
well, yeah,
there's a transfer window coming up, and that's why these defeats and this point in the season's interesting.
I think he genuinely means it when he says do it better as well. I mean, he's obviously that's his motivation this season, isn't it? He's saying we can't go unbeaten, we might not get 100 points, but I still want to do it better. And I think that's the message he's getting across to the players. We can't step off at all. We've got to do it better. And obviously, the intense way they play is quite precise as well. They can't step off at all. They can't just coast through a game. It's just impossible to do so.
But it's that both physical and mental intensity. I mean, how long can you maintain that for? I referenced those injuries to Aguero and to De Bruyne and to Mendy, and there have been some other knocks in recent weeks. Jesus himself was out for a little while. Obviously, and so, you know, Silva went off yesterday with a hamstring, correct? And you wonder, you know, when that must inevitably take its toll. And there's also then the, you know, I mean, you can't get away from the fact that he is so intense and what effect it has on the players. He came to one of our dinners in Manchester recently, and he was saying about how even 24 hours before a game, the nervous energy, he said, just absolutely builds up inside him. And they were playing Southampton the next day, by the way. I mean, you can't have been that nervous, surely. It was like, you know, it was at home. So, but he was saying how that, you know, and that leaves him, he was saying, because it was after that game, and he came to the dinner, and he's saying it leaves him absolutely drained. After the game, drained, he says, because of the exertion, not just of match day, of building up to it 24 hours before. Now, I'm guessing he's such a brilliant coach that he takes all that. He doesn't pass that on to the players. But still, if you're a player and you see the intensity of that, you know, the pressure's on. And to do that day in, day out, week in, week out for games must be quite tough. It's such a demanding thing to do. You watched that first half yesterday, physically. They were so quick and they were so... But, you know, keeping that for 90 minutes is... And they couldn't in the end.
Big win for Liverpool yesterday, 4-0 at Bournemouth. Mo Salah scoring the goals for fun again. He's now joint leading goal scorer in the Premier League, but isn't he very happy when he scores them?
No, but he's always been a bit like... there's always been an individual element to his celebration. I think he's quite a shy fella, and he's got quite within himself when he scores a goal. He was substituted last week, of course, in the derby. We were talking about that, and I thought it was probably the wrong substitution. Maybe that's given him a little sense of something to prove. Maybe he has digested some of the criticism, if it's been criticism this year, that he's not been at his best. And yesterday was a kind of performance you can say to people haven't gone anywhere. But I mean, he scored 12 and 22. He's on course for 30 goals. It is ridiculous that there's been even a question mark about him. Maybe that's what it was about. I thought it was it was a nice gesture, but slightly odd that he gave his man of the match away to James Milner as well. Yeah. Maybe that spoke of a little bit of unhappiness with us in the media, because it was a media award, obviously.
Is the advantage they are top, Liverpool, but have they got the players, the qualities to see this through?
I think City will win it, but I think they're going to get close, and I think that's what we're seeing now, is that they've got that sort of staying power. And I think Jonathan made a very interesting point about the midfield, because that's the area he's got to get right. Yeah. He's got the defence right, the forwards will look after themselves, they will eventually come good, all of them. That midfield combination, if you can get that midfield combination right, if Keita and Fabinho can be the players they've been brought to be, then suddenly, yes, you have got a real team that can go a long way towards winning that title. I think what's interesting yesterday was that they played first for once, and they've been playing catch-up every week, and they've done extremely well. So basically, at the Merseyside derby, it's 0-0 going to the last minute. You're almost thinking, bizarrely then, this title race could be over now.
Yeah.
This could be it.
Oh, yeah.
And then suddenly, a week later, the top.
Right.
And to the top. And next week, of course, I think
It's over. Classic. Classic journalist.
But no, but that was it. I mean, all of those who were at the Mersey derby last Sunday are actually thinking, you know, particularly if Everton
City are the winners of the Merseyside derby, basically, weren't they?
That were in the headlines. Those were in the headlines. And instead it turns its head. And next week, I think Man City play on this Saturday against Everton. Yeah. And then it's Liverpool, Man United, huge game on the Sunday. So it's going to be great to have that to and fro. And I'd say don't you know, we should not ignore the other teams up there in their top six at all. I think Liverpool, I keep changing, you know, and there's nothing wrong, I think, with changing your opinion from what only on this weekend's evidence. So from what I can see of City, just, you know, maybe not just in this game, maybe in the game, the scare at the end of the Watford game. I was at the home game against Bournemouth when they won comfortably enough, but it was 1-1 at half time, and they weren't showing all the normal fluid signs. You know, to me now, I doubt they are, but Liverpool would be my slight favourites at this moment. And I think now, and now Salah is playing well.
But they're top by a point. He's going with whoever's top.
No, that's just
week by week.
But they are defensive.
You're saying before about playing the top six, and that will sort of basically define who wins the league. What I think, actually, though, is that I think City will beat everyone else. They will beat everyone else. I think I could see Liverpool just slipping up occasionally against the other teams. And I think, actually, that could be quite a factor as well going into it.
Well, that sort of result yesterday suggested they won't do that.
No.
You know, Bournemouth looked you might call it a potentially tricky one. Nothing of the sort. You know, in fact, Liverpool sort of dispatched Bournemouth away far more efficiently than City did at home. Yeah. So, and I just think defensively now they look so good. Liverpool at the moment defensively.
And Salah only conceded 6 goals.
And Salah, you know, just going back to the way Salah celebrates, and that is just the way some players celebrate, don't they? You know, just look at the crowd and just, you know, they're not all for choreographed celebrations. Some are just for, you know, I'm doing my job. And giving it to Milner was nice. It was Milner's 500th appearance, wasn't it? So which, to me, shows a bit of a camaraderie amongst them as well.
Well, that was the Liverpool rap from Andy Dunn in about 2 minutes. But there's one thing you did forget to mention in that. Jurgen Klopp and his £8,000 fine for running on the pitch to celebrate that goal from Divock Origi last week in the Merseyside derby. What are your thoughts on that? On what he did and the subsequent action? He obviously admitted the transgression, was fined £8,000 by the FA.
I can understand what he did because that's in his character, and I don't think you can just ask people to change their characters in a heartbeat when something like that happens. I mean, those of us who were there, you know, it was an incredible moment for everyone in the ground for one reason or another. So what he did, I think this idea that he should be somehow excused punishment because it's in, you've got to take into account, Robbie Fowler in my newspaper today says, you know, well, it's that incredible derby atmosphere, it's that incredible moments. Well, I get that, and that's why he ran on. However, you know, you just can't have managers running 30 yards onto the pitch to congratulate the players during a game. You just can't have it. So he has to be fined and warned and does it again. It's quite straightforward. It's quite straightforward. It's a transgression, and he's fined.
I don't know, let's pluck a manager out of the air. Jose Mourinho. If he ran on the pitch when Jesse Lingard scored for Manchester United against Arsenal, would he have been fined £8,000 by the FA and said, Jose, please don't do that again?
I thought you were going to say, would he have found a player to celebrate with him? But, oh dear. Of course, he'd have been fined more, but he's got a bit more previous than Jurgen Klopp. He had to be punished, but the human being in you just enjoyed the moment, surely. And he can't be allowed to do it. It's right that what's happened, but I wouldn't read anything more into it other than it was, you know,
a bit of over-exuberance.
Jurgen Klopp moment.
What's amazing is
don't forget that Jose has been sanctioned for that, for actually.
Oh, he'd have got worse.
Encroaching. No, but he has been sanctioned in the past for encroaching about half a yard, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, I was technically,
but that was when the ball was in play.
The ball was in play.
The ball was in play as opposed to the
But I mean, I agree with Jonathan. There is an element of not menace, but there is an element of something slightly more sort of aggressive about the way that Mourinho does tend to do things. Yeah. I mean, there is that element of him that you think, you know, I haven't seen Jurgen Klopp go onto a pitch and stick his finger in somebody's eye. I've seen Jose Mourinho do that. What surprised me about Jurgen Klopp is such an experienced manager, he still does this. It's like a kid, basically. I mean, how can he still behave in that manner? I mean, it's amazing in some ways, and obviously the Liverpool fans love it, and there's all sorts of things going on social media, putting it to music and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's just amazing that he still kind of does that. But I think the FA and the authorities do have to take him previous when they punish these guys. People will say, yes, Jurgen Klopp has done quite a lot of... He has been in the face of fourth officials before. He has shouted quite menacingly at people. But he doesn't quite have that same air of aggression, shall we say, that we get with Mourinho.
Yeah. OK, well, we're going to talk about that man, Mourinho. He's coming next because his agent released a statement in the week to say what a good job Mourinho is doing as Manchester United manager. More on that next. Welcome back with us this morning, Jason Burt, Andy Dunn and Jonathan Northcroft. Let's just remind you what's in the papers this morning. It's all across the tabloids disgusting. Chelsea and the Metropolitan Police launched an investigation into abuse aimed at Raheem Sterling during Manchester City's 2-0 defeat against Chelsea yesterday. It's on the back of the Sunday Mirror as well. Chelsea race storm, that investigation ongoing, of course. The Sunday Telegraph leading on the title race. It's on. David Luiz scoring Chelsea's second goal yesterday in that 2-0 victory. The Mail screams, "You blew it." Liverpool, they're on top after their 4-0 victory over Bournemouth yesterday. Big win here for Manchester United. Ashley Young scoring an absolute cracker. A new contract on the way for him, you would think. And Marcus Rashford as well. They cash in, they beat Fulham 4-1. Good headline this. Mo Ho Ho. Hat-trick for Mo Salah in that 4-0 victory over Bournemouth yesterday. Let's talk Manchester United, though, because rather unexpectedly, Jose Mourinho's agent, Jorge Mendes, released a statement, Jason, on Friday to say what a good job his client is doing, and he's very happy at Manchester United, and Manchester United are very happy with the work he's doing, 16 points behind Liverpool at the top. Why did Mendes release that statement? I think I know what you're going to say, what you're going to bring to the table here, but... Why would he do that? It's unprecedented.
It is, and it's extraordinary, really, as you say. It may well have been in response to a certain story that appeared that morning by... who wrote that story?
Yeah, OK. An up-and-coming journalist.
Yeah, exactly.
The
Sun, obviously.
So that was in The Sun. That was Maurizio Pochettino. That was a story that's the story, hands up, that I wrote about Manchester United wanting Maurizio Pochettino, and obviously... That's caused ructions, or that's caused a stir at Manchester United, and Mourinho and his agent aren't happy about it. That's what we can deduce from that.
Absolutely. But for an agent then to release the statement, I beg his belief. Why is he speaking on behalf of Manchester United? You know, I mean, it's up to Manchester United if they want to release a statement about their employee, not for the agent. The agent is not there to talk on behalf. He can talk on behalf of his client, but don't drag Manchester United into it. Say Manchester United are happy. It's up to Manchester United to make their own statements. If they don't want to make a statement, then fine, leave it. And obviously, it's very unusual for football clubs to make statements. And we've seen time and time again that even when they do make statements, often those statements aren't necessarily wholly truthful or last very long anyway. I mean, we all know it wasn't so long ago that Shahid Khan at Fulham was saying that Djukanovic was going nowhere, and it was unbelievable media reports that his manager was in trouble. So I can understand why Manchester United wouldn't release a statement. And Jorge Mendes, it seems to me, to a degree, is saying, my client has his contract, he is honouring his contract. I expect that contract to be honoured either with him staying or him being paid the amount of money he is due if he's not staying. And that's what it seemed to relate to me. And I don't think it's a good look for Mourinho or for Mendes or for Manchester United that they felt that this statement was being made. I just don't really think it was necessary at all, and I think you rattled them.
No one likes to do that in this game, do they?
Well, it's
not with the aggravation it causes anyway.
No, although it is quite nice to. Well, we didn't hear from him. We just read the statement from Mendes. And I just agree with everything that Jason said. I think to actually say...
It felt tactical, though, didn't it?
Yeah.
I understand. But then why would he need to... a lot of people have said what you said, Jason, that it's the sort of opening salvo into what could be a protracted battle over a payoff if he goes. But why would it be a battle? I mean, surely he's just entitled to it if he gets sacked tomorrow.
The other angle to it is there's been sort of murmurings around whether or not Mourinho may want out himself, and there's the Real Madrid thing that's hanging around in the background about whether or not Perez wants him to go back to Real Madrid. So maybe he's just making it quite clear that actually the contract will be honoured, by the way. So we will honour our side of the contract, so we expect you to honour your side of the contract. That's what I'm wondering is part element of that as well, whether or not just his own future Manchester United, but this kind of constant murmurings around Real Madrid, because we don't think Solari's going to be there for that long, really, and they're going to have to get in somebody else. And I think Mourinho, there's that talk of Mourinho being wanted to go back there, so I think there's probably an element of that as well.
I think the actual statement said from Mendes that the club were very happy with him. Very happy, not just happy, not just content, not just satisfied, not just, OK, he's doing all right, we'll stick with him. Very happy. And surely he knows that the timing of that...
Maybe Jose wrote it.
But the timing of that, you know, was bizarre, because any right-minded, you know, Manchester United fan would say, well, how can they be very happy with him? You know, where we are in the league, we haven't won in 4 Premier League games. You know, we've only won 4 games at home. This is all before yesterday's win, by the way. You know, how can they be very happy with him? They can't be very happy with him, clearly. They can be, still have faith in him. They can still have faith in the ideas that he's bringing to the club. They can still have faith that he's going to make them a major force right at the very top of the table. They can still have faith that he's going to be successful in Europe. But they can't be very happy at this moment with him. So it was slightly bizarre.
We've all experienced boardrooms in various guys in various stages of our career. You know how they work. You know they can't be happy with the performance of the team. In isolation in one game against Fulham yesterday. Against Fulham yesterday, sorry. Yes, OK, this is good. This is the old Manchester United, scored 4 goals. Everyone goes home happy. But actually, the bigger picture is there's no way that boardroom could be happy.
But you're right, that's the point. I think Mendes is putting the spotlight on the Manchester United boardroom specifically. He's aware that they're not going to make a statement supporting Jose. Your story was about them, you know, making overtures to Pochettino. And the backdrop is that Jose Mourinho and Mendes don't feel that he's been supported by the United boardroom, going back to the transfer window where, you know, we've been bored to death by Mourinho about it, but, you know, he didn't get his defenders, and then United give a briefing where they explain why his targets were all rubbish and they know best. So he doesn't feel supported by them. Your story points out they might be looking at other managers, and this, I thought it was a tactical statement which puts a spotlight on Ed Woodward and the boardroom and almost sort of shames him, go and then back him.
Plus, we're assuming, aren't we, that clearly that Mourinho knows that Mendes is going to put out this statement. One assumes. They're so close, and their working relationship as well. And it will... The story about them lining up Pochettino as the candidate to take over from him, the fact is that will really annoy Mourinho on a personal level. I mean, how many times does he refer to coaches who haven't won anything and who are championed by us? You know, listen, don't get away from it. When he sees the sort of press that Mauricio Pochettino gets from journalists, you know, and he looks at it, it will really wind him up. The same as it wound him up when he thought, you all love Wenger. Now Posh has sort of almost taken that role, you know, and he'll be murmuring to himself, the guy's won nothing. How come they all love him? All these, you know, London-based journalists, maybe, or whatever. There's an element of that where that will really...
Jeremy Cross has sat in that exact same seat and said exactly what you just said.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah.
You
Londoners,
yeah. There you go. You down south. But that will wind him up. You know, that's what winds him up is the championing of other managers when he... That's hence why he feels the need to repeat the 25 trophies he's won every single week. He needs to repeat his achievements. He needs to get them across all the time. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It's a default mechanism to the fact that he'll pick up the papers and he'll see that Jurgen Klopp's, you know, the greatest thing since sliced bread, and he has not won a trophy at Liverpool. He sees that Pochettino is the best young coach in the country. And he hasn't won anything at Spurs. And Jose's like, well, hang on a minute, I've only been back here, whatever.
I also think we've got a transfer window opening in 3 weeks' time. And he wants a defender. So this is part of the strategy of saying, like, come on, you didn't back me in the last window. I want you to back me now.
Did you hear what he said?
We've also got the follow-on from the Pogba issue as well. He's called it on over Pogba. So it's almost like, are you going to back Pogba or are you going to back me? And I think there's a number of strategies going on here that are all interlinked, I think.
Did you hear what he said? Did you hear what he said when he came into the press conference yesterday, Jose? There was no water. He said no water. He's saving the money for the transfer window.
Constant chipping away, isn't it? It's like constant chipping away. And I think we'll see in the next couple of weeks, you know, there'll be more, he'll be linked with defenders. There was the Sunday Times today of Dunn who he definitely wants, but he's on a, you know, he is in that bracket
100 million,
he is in that bracket of player. Well, last summer it was like Man United would have bought Varane if they could have done because they have the money to do that if they can get that sort of player. Clearly, he's saying to him, well, I think Koulibaly's that sort of player. You know, where's the money now? But to get that money, he may be saying to them, OK, I don't mind if Pogba goes, if you need to raise money.
Yeah. What about Pogba? Because the back of the Sunday Mirror this morning, Mourinho's Pogba, and he talks about him playing against Valencia in their final Champions League group game. And Mourinho's saying, if you want to play for this football team, you've got to be a team player, and you're not. You're an individual. I
can see it both ways with this one, because Pogba's playing like a drain. I mean, he's playing really badly. I mean, the game against Southampton, I mean, the number of times he gives the ball away, and it doesn't make recovery runs. But he's an incredibly talented player. He's a World Cup winner. He is a player who should be central to everything that Manchester United want to achieve. So there's a real disconnect there as to what he's doing, what he can do, and what Manchester United and how Mourinho is dealing with him. So. And then he's talking about him being a player with potential to do this. He's 25, 26, a World Cup winner. It's not potential. You know, it's what's he going? You know, what is going wrong there? I hear conflicting stories about Pogba all the time. That he does want to go, he doesn't want to go. Some players are unhappy with him. Some players are happy with him. They think he's being badly treated. They think he's behaved badly. So you hear this constant sort of noise around him, and it just seems to it's become a real drain on Manchester United as well. Interestingly, they've clearly played a bit better without him, but not well enough. Not well enough to be able to discard him. I mean, clearly, this is the sort of player who's going to win the big games for them. So they've got to try and find a way of getting him back into the fight. And it's not just about running hard. It can't just be about running hard. There's something else going on there. I think my reading of it is he's sort of thinking, I want this guy to go because I want the money to go elsewhere. I want to. You're telling me, and this is where I want the money to go. I want you to get rid of him, and I want the money to come and re-strengthen other areas of the team. That's what I think is going on.
We've seen something missing in Pogba's makeup this year, I think, because the great players play well no matter who they're playing for, no matter if they're happy or they're not. There's a certain level of performance that they put in, and he has shown himself incapable of giving everything he can when the conditions aren't right for him. And that disappoints me as someone that admires his talent, but I think he's below the Gerrards, the Keanes, the Vieiras, the really consistent midfielders. But, you know, we're talking about Pogba, we're talking about Mourinho and his agent. You know, it was Sanchez a couple of weeks ago, Lukaku. United's become a soap opera of individuals, and that's the biggest problem for the club. And that even goes on before Mourinho. That's a Van Gaal, the Di Maria, the Rooney, the Zlatan in the early days. It's become this. It's gone from being the most unified, purposeful club in Britain to just this, what they used to say about Bayern Munich, FC Hollywood, and that's a failure of leadership. That's Ed Woodward. That's a lack of vision from the football department, the way it's being run downwards. That's what Jorge Mendes thinks he can bully the club by making a statement like that. Pogba thinks he can bully the club by drawing attention to his unhappiness when he's not happy. Mina Raiola comes out against them. You know, someone's got to get a grip of this from United's point of view. That grip that Fergie had has been relinquished to such an extent. It has, but
the club buy into these personalities and they sell them commercially.
Yeah, they've made
so you know the whole hashtag Pogback at the time, Sanchez at the piano. You know, it's now. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but they buy into the. And that's why Jose Mourinho was hired. And it's the opposite. He also commercially fits into what they're trying to do.
And it's the opposite to what we see the really successful modern clubs doing. City try and make themselves unified. Liverpool's about unity. That's what it's Tottenham. That's what it's about. United have gone in the opposite direction.
Yeah, they have done. But a big win for them yesterday, all the same, against Fulham at Old Trafford. It was just like the old days. OK, next up, we're going to talk Southampton. Their new manager, Ralph Hasenhüttl, has replaced Mark Hughes' first game yesterday, lost at Cardiff. More on that coming next. OK, let's talk Southampton now. New manager for them, Ralph Hasenhüttl. First game yesterday, defeat. He can't be expected to wave the magic wand immediately, but this is a seriously big job, seriously big task to be able to keep Southampton up. But what do we know about him, Jason? Is it going to be enough to find a way to stay in the Premier League?
It feels like a good appointment. I mean, obviously they lost yesterday, a little bit unfortunate. It feels like the right fit. It feels like this is the manager that maybe they've been looking for since Pochettino. Because of that kind of approach that he has. I think he's quite impressive. Obviously, he speaks very good English. He wanted to come into the Premier League. The problem I have with it is why didn't they do it in the summer? Because Mark Hughes kept them up. And then you get this strange situation where a club they just limped over the line, didn't they, with Mark Hughes? And then you get this strange situation where a club feels, oh, we better give him a contract because he kept us up. And you're thinking, well, actually, is he really what you want? Is he really the man for you to take you forward? And, you know, I think a lot of us looked at it, and I've got a lot of time for Mark Hughes. I think he has lost his way a bit as a manager, but previously I think he's been much maligned. But I don't think it was ever the right fit for the club, for him necessarily. And I just think they felt they had to give somebody a contract when really, did they really believe that this was the right man for them? And why didn't they just have that courage and conviction to sort of go for somebody else in the summer? Obviously, Les Reed is gone, so he's kind of carried the can for that as well, isn't he? So obviously they're trying to reset themselves. During a season, it's always very, very difficult. He's got a big job in his hand. It's a talented squad. There are good players in there. I mean, that defence is a bit of a disaster, but Vestergaard is just a walking disaster, frankly, as a defender. But I think he's the right appointment for them, and I think he will be a good fit for the Premier League because of the style of football he plays and the energy he will bring to that. But it's always a risk. There's a risk to try and change gear in this way. It's not just about changing a manager, it's about changing style as well.
When you say good fit, what do people mean by that? Because
right, so basically, like, nowadays in particular, clubs are looking for managers who train with the intensity in which they play. They want managers who are training ground managers, who are out on the training ground, work with the players, improving the players they've got and play with that intensity. He fits that mould. They will play a very high-energy game. They will be very, very aggressive. They will press extremely hard. And I think in the Premier League, that gets you an awful long way straight away if you get that work rate up and you're pressing really, really hard. So you will suddenly see the stats will massively increase for Southampton in terms of their sort of running and so on, the sprinting. That will help you a long way in the Premier League, and I think he fits. That's what I mean by a good fit.
But has anyone ever seriously called him the Alpine Klopp? Everyone says he's known as the Alpine Klopp. You called him the Alpine Klopp. You know, I mean, it's just. But this idea, though, I tell you what you say, and about him possibly being a good fit. But surely now, every manager that comes in, no manager comes in now and plays a low-energy game, do they? You know,
there are a few.
Apart from Jose. Well, I'm sure he doesn't deliberately do that. He does. You know, well. But you know, the idea that we all say now, you know, this has become the norm, hasn't it? You know, pressing. High pressing.
I think my understanding of him is he takes it to quite a new level in terms of he's extremely.
But can you just come in midway?
What is the difference between pressing and in old money going to shut a player
closing down?
Yeah,
closing down.
What's the difference? Is there a subtle difference?
There is more of an organised. It's more of a kind of you do it as a team.
Pincer movement.
It's more organised in that way. They have
to go with new language, Ash. That's it. You know. I mean, how about the pivot or the double pivot? What were they?
False swingers.
Exactly. False this and false that. I mean, a pivot we never had them. You had a holding midfielder, or you know, you play someone in front of the back four, the base midfield. They're now pivots, and as I say, there's now double. And pressing is just closing down and closing down. But you've got to be. Can you come in midway through a season and say all of a sudden now? Because you've got to be fitter, surely. Yeah. And he actually intimated, didn't he, that these next 2 or 3 weeks were going to be intense physical training at a time when most managers will say to you,
taper it more. Yeah.
We don't train now. And even Guardiola will say they do as little as possible now in terms of physical work on the training ground at this time of year. So if you're going to come in and say, right, over Christmas, you're essentially going to have a Alpine Klopp pre-season training session, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and he's got the rotten defence, because if you're going to high press, you need a reliable defence that can play high line, and that's the last thing they've got, isn't it? But
and that's the longer term malaise, isn't it? When you remember what decent defences they've had in the past, you know, with Van Dijk, with Fonte, and you think to yourself, you know, how have they got defensively into this situation?
What's happened to the Southampton way? How difficult is it? And I'm not just talking Southampton here, but that type of club, that profile, fan base, stadium, they've got it all without being Liverpool, Manchester City, in terms of finances, resources, history, pedigree over the years. But why does it always seem to fall away? Why can't clubs maintain it?
It's really...
Southampton had it all. The youth, the academy, the youth team, the great players. Then you add Lallana into that, Lovren, all those players who got sold on that they acquired. Pochettino, Koeman being able to attract a manager of his standing and stature within the game. Why does it always seem to fall away?
I mean, it's partly a sort of vision thing, that it's hard to keep selling the same thing if what you're selling is kind of mid-table security and selling players. I think specifically with Southampton, they have overdone the Moneyball element and sold too many players and relied on getting ones that are as good So Vestergaard's an example. It's just not as good as Van Dijk, nowhere near. So the recruitment's not been good enough. And I think they've recognised that by getting rid of Les Reed and putting Ross Wilson in a bigger position of power, and he should be the guy that can be the transfer guru again, and I think he's probably behind Hasenhüttl's appointment because of his sort of knowledge of German football. But I do think there's just a difficulty for mid-table clubs generally. You know, I live in Leicester. They face it's not exactly the same, but long term they're wondering what they're going to be. You know, they're 9th or a 10th club, or they get higher than that. They want to be higher than that. We saw Stoke were stable for so many years and then fell down. It's almost easier for the Bournemouths to sustain that kind of thing because being 9th or 10th in the Premier League is just a great adventure for them.
Southampton, have they got the players there to stay up? You believe they've got the right fit?
Yeah, I think they have.
Manager?
I think they have. I don't. Well, I mean to.
He's not having it. I saw Andy out the corner of my eye.
He's not right.
I think you don't have to be that great to stay up. I've got to say, I don't think the bottom of that. You're looking at 6 or 7 teams down there who aren't great.
If you walked into a football club now in the bottom 3 of the Premier League, Jason, what are the 3 key things you'd say? Okay, bang, bang, bang. This is what we're going to do to stay up.
Well, for Southampton...
In the Premier League, yeah.
Yeah.
What's required? Well,
you don't have to win that many games, but you've got to organise yourself far better than Southampton are organised. I mean, they're just so ragged as a team. I mean, they just don't work hard enough. They're just not organised enough. They don't have that intensity that you need. But if you look at them going forward, they've got plenty of options.
Yeah.
They've got a lot of good players who are underachieving consistently in that midfield and forward area. So I think defensively, I would look at it and say, they definitely need to organise their defence far better than they are, and then going forward be much more clinical. I mean, they've got to rate. I mean, I take Andy's point about you can't do this kind of like mini pre-season in December. Well, they're going to have to. They're just going to have to. That's it. You haven't been working hard enough to this point, so you're going to have to. And that's just the way it is. So they're going to have to do that. And I think the problem with them is that, and it goes back to the recruitment, is you look at that squad and you know, it's much for muchness in many ways.
Yeah.
And somebody said to me recently that they might well win the League Cup because the sort of second string is just as good as the first string. There's no great difference. It's like a group of players who are just OK, basically, and they need to do far better.
Presumably that was before the Leicester game, was it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think they'll find it a big change in culture, you know, because by all accounts, you know, and I think Mark Hughes has been unfairly maligned at times in his managerial career, but I do think, and from what you hear, he's not overly sort of active on the training ground. You know, he's not pushing on the training ground. He's more a statesman-like figure, you know, and then match days, you know, gets heavily involved in organising everything, but not a training ground coach in the manner that this guy clearly is. So they're going to find a big culture change, and maybe they either respond to that positively or they don't. And if they don't respond positively, then that's a team that's going down. Yeah,
sure. OK, Southampton in the bottom 3. A team that's just got out of the bottom 3 is Burnley. But I'd like to touch on the fireworks with between Sean Dyche and Jurgen Klopp in the week over some of the challenges between those, over some of the incidents and challenges that went on between those 2 sides. Was anybody in the right? Was anybody in the wrong here?
I thought it didn't reflect well on Sean Dyche, actually, even though I wouldn't say he was wrong. I just think that when a player's broken his leg like Joe Gomez did, the only note you can really strike is one of sympathy, and even though Sean was trying to defend his player, by saying anything other than we hope the boy recovers and, you know, it's a shame, you then seem to be, you know, and it was a fine tackle by Ben Mee, but you're just getting into that old school English coach, you know, foreigners don't like it up and what's Klopp complaining about. It's not a good look. Sean Dyche won't be bothered about how it looks, actually. He's never has been. But I just think that would have been the more sensible thing to say. Instead, he's called on a kind of war of words, in the middle of which a player's broken his leg. And Klopp said the worst tackle was Phil Bardsley on Moreno, and he was quite right. So, you know, if the Ben Mee tackle had been the only incident, and it was a OK tackle, Sean Dyche would be on stronger ground. But it's quite easy for Klopp to point to 2 or 3 other incidents, including that Bardsley one, and Bardsley's got a bit of previous on that sort of thing. And I just don't know why Sean Dyche has really done this at a time when Burnley are struggling.
Well, his initial comments were in the immediate aftermath of a defeat in a game in which they'd taken the lead, so I can understand that. There are also reactions to Klopp's comments. And Klopp's comments, don't forget, weren't necessarily saying...
They're quite mild, though, Klopp's comments, weren't they?
Well, they were mild, but they were sort of suggesting that because of the conditions, you know, players were sliding in from 5 and 6 yards away, and these are challenges that are not illegal, although some might suggest they are, but they are very dangerous. That's what Klopp was saying, basically. You know, he stopped short of suggesting that Burnley were a dirty team. He stopped way short of that. But even so, then I think, you know, the frustration for Dyche was they lost the game. The frustration then is that again, Klopp's comments, he knows will be out there. I'm not sure Dyche, when his initial comments were made, also knew the severity of the injury so I think we should put him a little bit of slack on that one. So I can understand why he reacted. I don't think he particularly needed to bring up well, it's quite within his rights, but the Daniel Sturridge cheating element to it. And I think the underlying thing that will always go back as well to, if you remember a couple of seasons ago, Dyche will always have, you know, and understandably so, when he's referencing foreign coaches getting credit for diets, for training regimes, he was saying, well, I've been doing this at Burnley, and not a mention.
Yeah, sure. OK, guys, so we need to move on. We're going to talk Newcastle next. Apparently the club's up for sale, and Mike actually says it's soon to be sold. More on that next. OK, I'm forever indebted, actually, to a good friend of mine who works in the industry for flagging this up during one of the breaks. Forgive me for not having my mobile phone on the table, but Raheem Sterling, while we've been on air, has posted on Instagram 2 separate stories. He actually did a little bit of comment first. He said that... Raheem says, good morning. Regarding what was said at the Chelsea game yesterday, as you can see by my reaction, I just had to laugh because I don't expect no better. For example, you have 2 young players starting out their careers, both playing the same team, both have done the right thing. He goes on to post 2 separate stories. The newspaper involved is the Daily Mail, both online, but one Manchester City player, one black Manchester City player, Tosin Adarabioyo, who bought his bought his mother a house, despite having never started a Premier League game. And Raheem Sterling also goes on to talk about Phil Foden buying a new £2 million home for his mum. Foden came on yesterday as a substitute for Manchester City. The point Raheem Sterling is making here is that the coverage of the 2 stories by the same website, by the same organisation, is very, very different. He says Raheem says this is unacceptable. This young black kid is looked in a bad light, which helps to fuel racist, aggressive behaviour. And he goes on to talk about newspapers should have a better understanding of where these guys started their careers, their backgrounds, their family backgrounds. And look, he accepts they earn good money, but they're entitled to do whatever they want with it. It's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, it absolutely is. You know, the reporting of it, as Jonathan was talking about before, in terms of, you know, is it because, you know, he's a young black guy with a certain sort of perception of him by people, you know, absolutely right. If one story's been reported differently than another, simply because of the colour of somebody's skin, well, the Daily Mail have got a lot to answer for, haven't they? Quite frankly, because that's unacceptable, and they need to justify themselves. And I think he's perfectly within his rights to highlight that. Perfectly within his rights, and hopefully that will be picked up upon and reported properly tomorrow, and obviously later today as well. But I think we all need to get into that a bit more today, and the whole issue. It's a big problem. It's a huge problem. I mean, OK, so the incident yesterday at Stamford Bridge is on the back pages of a lot of newspapers, and it's been covered inevitably. But to my mind, Raheem Sterling has just, in a social media post, has just changed the dynamic and our coverage and reportage of that game and the wider picture here. That tomorrow's news is right. Is right here in front of us, isn't it? That he has just decided what the media agenda will be tomorrow. And coming from him... No one will ignore this. No, I don't. No one will ignore it. We will now write about this very subject. No one will ignore it. And I think, you know, Raheem Sterling going public with his concerns about this, you know, is an important step. An important step here, an important step for addressing this whole issue. And you're right, he is now setting the agenda on there. And it's good. And if it makes our industry be slightly introspective and have a look at itself and examine, could we have done anything better, then that's fine. You know, I mean, I honestly think that is, you know, it's for a discussion, probably a long discussion some other time. But even beyond that, I think we can all look at each other and see, even if subconsciously we report on black players different than we report, you know, on white players. Simple as that. Do we subconsciously do that? How do we refer to black players in terms of their physicality? In terms of, you know, how would you refer to, you know, a black centre forward to a white centre forward? Sometimes in very different language.
You know, and managers do the same thing. And I think if that makes us all look at, well, how do we actually report this? Or is anything that we do that actually sort of fans any sort of flame of prejudice, then it's got to be stopped. As I say, you may not do it, you know, reporters may not do it deliberately. But if they then examine themselves and say, well, do I actually do it, and could I do anything more to address this issue, then it's got to be a good thing, and fair play to Raheem for doing this.
Yeah, fair play to Raheem. He's got a lot of support from the football community as well off the back of this post, but not only from football fans, but also from teammates as well. Phil Foden, Patrick Van Arnholt at Palace, Fabian Delph at City, Damari Gray. He's got a lot of support in a very, very short space of time. So good on you, Raheem Sterling, for flagging that up this morning. We did talk about Raheem in being Raheem in part one. Let's talk about being Mike Ashley. He says his club is for sale. He is going to sell it. Will this club ever be sold? Are they close to being sold?
Well, look, if I was a cynic, I would look at the fact there's a transfer window coming up where the manager of Newcastle would quite like some reinforcements and the fans would quite like Mike Ashley to spend. And I'd also look at the fact those fans are going to protest. And really, really nice coincidence that there's a story about Newcastle being taken over, put out by Mike Ashley, that just happens to come at a time when that means that the fans call off the protests, and he can then say, "Oh well, I'm not, you know, I'm not going to spend because we're being taken over." Now that's a really, really cynical reading of it. I might be completely wrong, but we've just been here before with Mike Ashley, where from time to time he dangles this prospect of selling the club. He does want to sell the club, but he wants to sell it for quite a high price and under his own terms. And I do feel cynical about the timing. I do feel that it's quite convenient for Mike, because it was a typical thing where he says, "I'm close to sight, I'm more hopeful than ever." It's pretty vague stuff. Yeah. And you do find with football takeovers that they just happen. They're not trailed publicly. They just happen. They're not trailed in this way. And there's already been doubt cast on whether the American consortium led by Peter Kenyon actually has any money behind it. So I suspect we might be here before the summer talking about the same thing. But I hope for Newcastle fans' sake that I'm completely wrong, because as we all know, that club needs a new direction.
I mean, Rafa put it was almost a sales brochure, isn't it, in the papers this morning about why you should buy it.
He's desperate.
I help like that.
Well,
Well, he's in the final year of his contract, isn't he? So I mean, he's desperate for it to happen.
Rafa doesn't want to leave. He loves Newcastle, but he's now at crunch time. His contract's up in the summer. He can't compete for any kind of prizes or titles with Newcastle. That's what he's in football to do. He said to us this week that he reckons he's got 10 years left as a manager, and that's 10 years in which he wants to be winning stuff again. That's not going to happen at Newcastle. But you know, his heart is there. He wants it to be change. He wants it to be some sort of different direction, and maybe the sales brochure will help alert people to that.
I think this time around, I think if Ashley doesn't find a buyer, if Ashley doesn't sell this time around, the ramifications are even more serious than they have been in the past. And I think what you'll find is not a furious backlash from Newcastle fans in the forms of protests, in the forms of, you know, any direct action. But I think what you'll find if it doesn't come off this time is basically fans will just start to be apathetic, lose interest, not go to games. St James's Park won't be full, and it'll be a long decline. Yeah. So he needs to sell.
Yeah, certainly get very, very frustrated and angry and agitated with Mike Ashley if he doesn't sell the club this time. OK, guys, we've run out of time this morning. Thanks very much to your company. Thanks to Jason, to Andy and to Jonathan.